So you can trade football pre-off, you can trade football in play, that's what most people tend to do. But did you know also that you can trade football pre-season? And not only that, it's a very intuitive and easy way to understand how to get a decent trade within the market. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Please like and comment on the video below. That will allow me to produce better quality videos and more of them in the future. If you're interested in learning to trade successfully on sports, then why not visit the BetAngel Academy, where we have more detailed videos. So yeah, me and football go back many, many years. It was the first market that I properly modelled. I wanted to understand how to model a football match, why that would occur that way, what influenced in play, and this was way before anybody had really sort of done that sort of stuff. This was back in the late 80s. And I used that knowledge to win a first dividend on the Littlewoods pools. It was the first really, really, really big win that I had on a gambling market. And on the football pools, you basically had to forecast a draw. And that's what I did successfully. That's what it's all about. It's not about the theory and all of the models and that. It's about actually turning that into something. But yeah, in my office, we have that on the wall as a permanent reminder of where I started. But when we go into the football season, we're about to start the football season, and everybody's asking the same question, such as, you know, I've been swapping texts this week with people, and it's like, where do we think we're going to finish up this year within the league? So have a guess. Who do you think is likely to win the league this year, and who do you think is most likely to get relegated? No cheating by looking on the Betfair markets. Just have a think off the top of your head in terms of who you think will be at either end of the table. Now obviously in the Premier League, Manchester City were very dominant last year, and their dominance is expected to continue into this year. So you would necessarily put them at the top of the league. After all, Pep Guardiola, I can't even say his name, Pep Guardiola is a fantastic manager, isn't he? Or is he? The fact remains that Manchester City have spent more money than anybody else on player acquisitions, and that's why they won the league. So I've done videos on this before. It's that basic. The more you spend, the higher up the league you will finish. And if you outspend your rivals, then generally speaking, as long as nothing unusual goes on, then generally you will end up higher than most of your rivals. The gear is leagued up that way. It's unfair. And basically, if you're not in that top 6 highest spending clubs, you probably have no chance. Now, strange things do happen now and again, but it's generally not the rule. It's the exception rather than the rule. At the other end of the table, though, it's a little bit easier, because teams that spend very small amounts of money are the ones that tend to get relegated. They just can't compete. So do you know who has the lowest squad in terms of either player purchases or valuations? That team tends to be relegated each year. Have a guess who you think that is. This year it's Cardiff City. Most of the promoted clubs have outspent Cardiff, and Cardiff have spent very little, so they would be the club that you'd expect to see likely to be relegated. They just have not spent enough money to remain in the Premier League. But what we're talking about here is a trade that you can do before the season starts. But the reason for reprising the wage bill stuff is because that is directly related. I have done videos on wage bill and correlation to final league position. What I'll do is tag those on the back end of this particular video so that you can actually have a look and read through that in much greater depth and see the correlation. I'm not going to cover that in this video. What I want to cover in this video is how does that influence prices before the season starts. Now in some leagues you have promotion markets, and all of them have relegation markets. It only tends to be the top tier that have very active winner, stroke promotion and relegation markets. So if you look at the Premier League, the winner market is quite big, and if you look at the relegation market, there will be a lot of activity on that over the course of the season. I love trading relegation markets. When a club like Man City are dominant and their price is short in the winner market, sometimes you turn your attention to the other end of the table and trade the relegation markets. They can be great little markets to trade over the course of the year. And then usually a cluster of, in the same way that you have a cluster of teams at the top that spend enormous amounts of money, you have a lot of teams at the bottom that can't afford to spend much money, and they just fight it out in a mini league effectively over the course of the season. So yeah, check out the relegation markets as we move through the season. But let's have a look And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to give you the information, I'm going to get you to think it through in your head so you can see if you could have done these trades as well. But let's have a look at Manchester City to start with. You know, how much have they spent during the summer transfer window? Have they brought in brand new players? Well, no, they haven't actually. They haven't brought in that much. They haven't been that active. But they were miles ahead of the league last year anyhow, and that's probably expected to continue. So they haven't really bought in huge amounts of players, but they probably don't need to. So if you look at their price within the market, what do you think has happened? How has that price changed from when the market opened for the Premier League winner to the end of, or to where we are now within the transfer window? What do you think's happened with that if they haven't really done that much? Well, it's been an unusually active market is the answer, probably because they're odds on. Most odds on shots tend to have active markets. But generally you can see that because they didn't spend much, the price has drifted out, and then they have spent a little bit of money and the price has come back in. But nonetheless, they still remain heavy odds on favourites to win the Premier League. I'm going to have to go and check my records and find out what price other teams have been at the start of the season, because I'm thinking that this is a very short price. So, you know, let's go down and look at their bitter rivals, Manchester United. So how much have Manchester United spent during the summer transfer window? Now, to have an idea as to where we think the transfer policy is going, all you need to do is listen to the press that's coming out from the club, but also the manager. We know Jose Mourinho is very vocal in his thoughts and words, to put it politely. So what has Jose been saying? Hey Jose, tell us what you think about your transfer policy. He's been very clear that he said we're not spending enough, and if we don't bring in players and I don't get any additional signings, we're going to struggle. Why? It's because spending is relative. If you've got a team below you that spends much more than you during the transfer window, they're going to start catching you up. They're going to get that little bit closer to you. And if you're not spending as much as the team above you, or you're not investing in the squad, then your chances of winning the title are going to decline. So Mourinho has been very vocal in terms of saying that he's upset with the policy that they've had this year, and he doesn't think that they're spending enough and they haven't brought in enough players and so on. And you can see that within the data itself. There isn't enough activity in there. So what do you think has happened to the price of Manchester United to win the Premier League over the summer? Do you think that it's come crashing in because of all those great signings that they haven't made? Or do you think that the price has gone out? Do you think it's drifted, or do you think it's been a steamer? Well, the answer is pretty simple, really, isn't it? They haven't made the acquisitions that they need. They're not actively competing with City, and therefore their chance of winning the league is declining, and therefore the price has been drifting significantly. So yeah, you can see immediately that, you know, there's a correlation between how much teams spend, the state of the squad that they've got, and also how that is influencing what's happening to the price within the winner market. Now, if you look I'm just trying to think here of other teams. So, for example, Liverpool. You know, what sort of have Liverpool been spending freely this summer? You know, they almost won the Champions League last year, apart from that famous final where they had a bit of a mare with their goalkeeper. So they've replaced him during the summer window. Or maybe they've replaced him, he's still in the squad. Whether he plays or not is another question. But have a think about, you know, have Liverpool spent a lot of money? Are they being ambitious? Or have they actually just not spent anything? And, you know, where have things gone from there? And what do you think that has had, what impact that has had on their price? Do you think the free spending Liverpool over the course of the summer has caused their price to contract, to come in, their chance of winning the league is getting better, or do you think it's getting worse? Well, if we look at the graph, you can see fairly clearly all of that spending is having an impact on the winner market. As soon as the season gets underway, of course, you know, things can change around, but we're talking about this pre-season period where if you keep an eye on the transfer market, you can get a good steer on roughly where prices are likely to be going within that particular market. Now, you look at Arsenal, you know, you've got loads of complications thrown into the mix there in terms of a new manager. But if you look at Spurs, for example, they haven't spent much at all, so their chance of winning the league has not improved at all, and they are, in fact, from a Premier League perspective, outsiders. So, you know, these sort of trades are stuff that if you're into football and you're watching the transfer market and you have your ear to the ground, you can pick up on all of this sort of news and actively trade it during the off-season. And this is something that I do every year. I'm always interested in keeping an eye on transfer news. And, you know, if you look at Southampton, my team, You know, we've bought a few players into the squad, but probably all that we can do is stabilise our position in terms of the overall league into sort of mid-table obscurity, probably, because there are lots of people that spend above us. You can go to websites, I may do a video on this in a second, where they actually list all of the spending by teams above and below and up and down the league, how much they've spent, what the market value of those squads are, and that will give you a good steer on where these teams are expected to finish within the league. It never quite happens that way, but nonetheless it gives you a pretty good steer. If you look at the other end of the table, there are a few clubs down there that really haven't spent the money, say for example Swansea City. So I've got to jump in quickly here and say there was a mistake on this video. I noticed it when I was editing, and what I meant to say was Cardiff City, not Swansea City. I suppose there is a link there, and that they're both Welsh sides, but yeah, it's Cardiff City, not Swansea City. And as a consequence, their chance of winning the league, well, sorry, of not getting relegated, I should say, that was a bit of a slip, wasn't it? Is on the slide. It looks like the chance of them being relegated is improving, and therefore their odds are going to contract for relegation. But if you look at West Ham, for example, they've been spending a fair bit of money, so their odds on relegation are going in the other direction. They look less and less likely to be relegated. Some of the promoted teams have spent heavily this year, so as a consequence, if your team is towards the bottom of the Premier League and you haven't spent heavily in the summer, you're probably going to be chased down by some of these smaller teams. So anyhow, yeah, if you want to make some money before the season has even started, that's the way to do it.